Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating chain reaction. We're going to trace how massive macroeconomic trade policies rolling out of Washington actually triggered a highly specific local waste crisis, and then ultimately sparked a totally cutting-edge technological response. We're looking at the very deep, kind of surprising links between international border disputes and local innovation. Here is our roadmap for today. We've got 1. The USMCA tariff war. 2. The Michigan Waste Corridor. 3. Bill 5 and domestic capacity. 4. The looming circle levy. 5. AI at the compliance gate. And finally, 6. Building the sentient bridge. All right, let's jump straight into part 1, the USMCA tariff war and a sudden geopolitical standoff. So this timeline shows an escalation that culminated just recently, on July 20, 2026. Right after the deadline to renew the U.S. CUSMA, or USMCA, trade agreement passed without a deal, U.S. President Donald Trump announced sweeping 50% tariffs on nearly $20 billion worth of Canadian goods. The administration cited caps on U.S. vehicle exports and European dairy access as the main drivers here. Now, the political response up north was pretty swift. While Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney promised negotiations to modernize the pact, Ontario Premier Doug Ford took a notably retaliatory stance. As you can see, he advocated for hitting back tariff to tariff, which suggested counter levies on vital exports like energy. And really, this kind of rhetoric set the stage for some significant, highly tangible friction right at the U.S.-Canada border. Moving on to part 2. The Michigan Waste Corridor, which turns out to be a very vulnerable pipeline. Caught squarely in the crossfire of this trade war is municipal solid waste, or MSW. You might not know this, but every single year, Ontario exports a staggering 3.46 million tons of trash shipped across the U.S. border to Michigan landfills. To put that into perspective, that export makes up 14.35% of literally all waste disposed of in Michigan. It's a massive disposal corridor that has historically relied on rock-bottom export prices. But well, this pipeline was already under severe threat. Back in 2024, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer proposed a mind-boggling 1,289% increase in landfill tipping fees. That's the cost operators pay to actually dump the trash. Raising those rates from a mere 36 cents all the way up to $5 per ton was an explicit move to bring Michigan's fees in line with regional averages, and specifically to deter Canadian haulers from treating the state like a cheap dumping ground. So you have to wonder, with these massive geopolitical tariffs looming, the USMCA totally in limbo, and cross-border transport costs threatening to skyrocket due to those state-level fee hikes, what exactly happens to 3.46 million tons of garbage if the Michigan corridor essentially shuts down? Where does it all go? That brings us to part 3, Bill 5 and fast-tracking solutions. To build up self-reliant infrastructure, Ontario passed Bill 5 in June 2025. This legislation was controversial because it removed comprehensive environmental assessment requirements for waste projects, effectively fast-tracking sites like the York 1 dump in Dresden. Provincial leaders framed this as a completely necessary defense against potential unilateral border closures, and honestly, the clock is ticking loudly here. Ontario is facing complete domestic landfill exhaustion by 2034, plus a specific ban on landfilling clean wood, known as the Rewood ban, hits in 2029. So the industry is being forced to find alternatives, and fast. Which leads perfectly into part 4, the looming circle levy and the resulting financial squeeze. So let's look at the circle levy. This is Ontario's aggressive push toward a circular economy. The province is now heavily taxing mixed landfill waste at $60 per ton to basically forced recycling. Meanwhile, clean, source-separated materials like wood, which they categorize as the amber band, are taxed at only $10 per ton. The financial spread here is just drastic. Take a look at the math for a massive 19-ton long-haul trailer, what the industry calls a mothership. If it's verified as clean wood, it carries a levy of just $191.50. But that exact same truck, if it gets classified as mixed waste, that'll cost over $1,149. Failing to separate waste is no longer just a bad look for the environment. It is literally absolute financial ruin for these companies. Now for part 5, AI at the compliance gate, which is our micro solution. All right, here is exactly where the macro meets the micro. To survive these brutal levies, a specialized firm called 905 Wood engineered a brilliantly simple edge computing solution. They actually deployed the Google Pixel 10 Pro running Android 16 with the new LiteRT AI stack features. What this does is run complex machine learning models directly on the device itself. That means they can sort and do verification on waste right at these chaotic construction dumpsters, even in total network dead zones, without needing a lick of internet connectivity. So how does this 95-wood digital refinery workflow actually look in practice? Well, using the Pixel 10 Pro's Tensor G5 chip, the driver simply points the phone at the wood. In under 500 milliseconds, an AI model called Gemma 4 E2B visually classifies the load. If it's even slightly unsure, a secondary visual fallacy guard kicks in just to guarantee total accuracy. Once verified, the digital refinery application workflow instantly generates the required PDF documentation right in its UI/UX output features. Specifically, it creates a certificate of origin and a request for quote. It basically freezes that compliance data in time, completely shielding the load from those heavy mixed waste taxes. And finally, part 6, building the sentient bridge. By totally mastering this edge AI technology, 905wood has essentially created what they call a sentient bridge between messy, chaotic construction waste and highly regulated, high-purity green markets. By verifying the purity right at the source, this digital refinery transforms what used to be garbage into verified feedstock for the pyrogenic biocarbon market. Think of high-tech biochar used for carbon capture. So by operationalizing the Pixel 10 Pro and the LiteRT AI stack, they're not just moving trash, they're actively securing Ontario's industrial leadership in the global circular bioeconomy. And they're doing it completely insulated from Washington's tariff wars. And the bottom line reality here is just staggering. By executing this exact workflow to lock in the lowest legal rate, 905wood successfully dodges the mixed waste penalties and saves exactly $1,034 in circle levies on every single mothership load. Talk about a massive competitive moat, right? And it's built entirely on localized AI compliance. So we started today's explainer looking at macro trade policies in Washington, USMCA, tariffs, and border disputes. And we ended up with 3-nanometer silicon chips sorting wood waste in Ontario, Canada, to avoid crushing local taxes. It really leaves us with a profound question. As geopolitical walls go up and international trade becomes more fraught, how will localized on-device AI continue to reshape our supply chains and redefine resource management from the ground up? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today.